Hello and welcome to the F1 Paddock with me, Rosanna Tennant, and I'm joined by former Formula One driver Jolyon and Formula One's Lawrence Barretto. Guys, what a glorious backdrop this is for a Formula One race. I mean, you know what it's like to go racing. This is a sensational place, isn't it, Jolyon?
It's ticking a lot of boxes, I have to say. Driving in and you get the bit of mountain air, bit of mountain feel. It's beautiful around here, really picturesque. Quite remote as well. We're far from city life in the hills of Austria. But yet we have so many people flock in, and even today there's a huge amount of Max Verstappen fans that always come to Red Bull's home race. And the track's nice as well. Short, seven corners really, but some technical bits and often good racing.
Yeah, we heard the crowd shouting earlier, weren't sure what was going on. Then we realised it's the Dutch army out in force. Jolyon says short and sweet. We've got some extra spice this weekend as well, Lawrence. It's a sprint weekend, so plenty to look out for.
Definitely a nightmare for the teams who are still trying to learn about their upgrades. They've only got one practice session to get new bits on the car and see how they're reacting. They're not going to want to do a lot of that because that's the only session to set the car up for the rest of the weekend. So really hard work for them, but exciting for us because I think it's great we get two qualifying sessions. Obviously one's the sprint shootout. Got another race on Saturday in the sprint, and I think that has an opportunity to maybe, in an ideal world, mix things up. Jolyon was talking about a short lap. A lot can happen on that short lap, and the field is so tightly packed that the smallest mistake, you'll get kicked out of Q1 when you shouldn't have done.
It's nice, isn't it? There are nice peaks throughout the weekend for everybody here at the track to enjoy, and people at home as well. We see Max Verstappen just heading through into the garage. It's a beautiful day here in Austria, nice and warm, slight breeze, but we are promised some rain over the course of the weekend. If you add that to a sprint weekend, Joe, it's going to be a tricky one for the teams and drivers, especially, as Lawrence says, with just one FP1 session.
Yeah, we had a first sprint weekend of this format in Baku, and it just felt breathless the whole way through. You do have a qualifying already as tomorrow on Friday, and then Saturday's all action, another qualifying and a sprint, and then the Grand Prix on Sunday. If weather hits at any point, it's probably going to affect something, because apart from practice in the first session tomorrow around lunchtime, everything counts, and that's kind of part of the fun really. If you have a bit of rain, someone can shine, then yeah, it can affect the sprint, can affect points, or can affect qualifying or the Grand Prix still. And
it's a circuit that can bite. In years gone by, we've heard the Mercedes race engineers, for example, telling their drivers to stay off the curbs because they were worried about the impact that would have on the cars. So it's a circuit that bites back, so reliability could be all important this weekend as well.
Yeah, and we hear about track limits all the time, especially in those final two corners, 7 and 8. They're always wanting to run quite wide because they want to get as much lap time as they can. There's gravel traps here, which is great. They're quite punishing, and we've seen quite a few guys up towards the bottom of the hill that ended up into the gravel, pushed off, not giving anyone space. So yeah, it's a good old school circuit that does generally deliver great racing.
Well, we had great racing 10 days or so ago. We've moved from Canada to Europe again, back for the Austrian Grand Prix, of course, but let's relive a little bit the Canadian Grand Prix. We had some nice battles. Lawrence, can you remember all of them?
Well, I'm going to try and tell you all of them in 60 seconds. I'll give it a good go.
Okay, are you ready? On your marks, get set, go.
Well, as ever, Max Verstappen was on pole position. He made a great start, but the real interesting thing was what was happening behind him. That was Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso going for a great battle. Lewis got ahead. Everyone actually managed to make it through that squirmy bit to start with, reasonably unscathed. Further on that lap, Nico Hülkenberg qualified so well, but actually fell back. That was the first of pretty miserable afternoon for him. Lots of mistakes happening there. Logan Sargent retired with what the team said was a critical issue, but it was a great performance for his teammate Alex Albon. He got P7 at the end of the race. Huge points for them, moves them up above AlphaTauri in the Constructors' Championship. Elsewhere out on circuit, Lewis, Fernando still battling. Fernando had to get the job done on the track. He passed him. He made it into P2. Obviously, runaway leader Max Verstappen leading at the front. Lewis Hamilton got that final podium position. Charles Leclerc got ahead of Carlos Sainz, who was 5th for the 4th time, I think, in 5 races. Sergio Perez fought back through the field, got P6, and then the rest of the field was Valtteri Bottas P10, Lance Stroll P9, and Esteban Ocon P8.
That was lovely, and I like the way you sort of went through the race, not necessarily chronologically. It was sort of just picking out your top stories.
I tried to.
I enjoyed that.
There's a lot to talk about in that race.
There is, absolutely. You can find Lawrence's writing on F1.com as well if you want to have more of that lyrical genius. Well, there we go. That was Canada, a lovely race to see us out of Montreal and now into Austria. Of course, Red Bull's home race, Jolyon. The first since Red Bull Racing's founder, Dietrich Mateschitz, died last year. So it's a poignant weekend, but poignant doesn't necessarily mean everything's going to go their way. or do you think they just are still unstoppable?
A poignant doesn't get you results, but a 2023 Red Bull does get you results. So there's a bit of both, I think. It'll mean a lot to Red Bull, I think, having the Austrian Grand Prix again, the Red Bull Ring, Dietrich Mateschitz' home race. And so I think this one, of all the races in the calendar, they always want to win it, but it will be a little bit more special if they can. And there are just some things that can trip you up. The curbs are quite big. They're difficult. They're car breakers, really.
Well, we know Max likes a curb from Canada. Nearly knocked himself out on a curb, didn't he? Last time
Yeah,
out.
he did as well. Yeah, the George Russell curb. So it can happen. Altitude is a bit of a thing here as well. So there's that to deal with. And again, brakes were a bit of an issue in Canada. It can happen again here. And then some technical corners that can make a difference. Short laps, so the times are very close. Obviously, they're favourites. Needless to say, Max Verstappen starts as a big favourite for everything this year. But there are enough things that they'll need to keep their eye on.
And of course, we say they are favourites. The one slightly limiting factor is Checo Perez. Has had a difficult 3 races in the lead up to this race. He wanted a restart in Canada, Lawrence. He needs another one here. He's going to need one every single weekend. What can he do? What does he need to be looking at? Should he be looking at Max's data? We sort of know perhaps he's trying to do his own thing. Is that wise?
I suppose he's looking at anything that he thinks is going to make a difference, and I guess you are going to have to try all avenues to try and get himself out of the hole that he's in at the minute. Obviously, qualifying is just where he's making a mess of it. He's not getting that rhythm leading into qualifying, giving himself way too much to do in the race. I don't think Red Bull, in fairness, are going to be too bothered by what's going on there, because Max is running away with the championship. They're comfortably ahead in the Constructors' Championship. But they could do with Checo just picking up a few more big results, because if Aston do get into that spot where they can start fighting for the win, they kind of want Checo to be in the way or make it a little bit more difficult for Fernando. Mercedes are going to keep on improving by the looks of it as well, so they are going to need him to start firing all cylinders. But his head is down. The pressure feels like it's increasing rather than Christian Horner saying it should be decreasing. So yeah, he's got to find something out of somewhere.
And we're outside the Red Bull Energy Station now, which of course they share with their sister team, AlphaTauri. Soon not to be AlphaTauri as Dr. Helmut Marko. I mean, he's been making headlines all week in the lead up to this race. Let's start with the fact that it's not going to be AlphaTauri anymore. There are going to be some facility changes as well. It's sort of, is it going to fix a few things? Is it just rebadging? We need more than that, surely.
Well, I think it could be a new aspect really for AlphaTauri. It's for next year we're talking. And they're having a tough time. They're a team that have fought for underdog victories and podiums. They've had brilliant drivers come through the ranks, and they've prepared champions. Vettel, Verstappen came through there. But this year's particularly a bit of a struggle. Nick de Vries is under pressure on his own, and the team's at the back of the field. And so I think what seems to be the direction is that they're going to try and bolster the whole team for next year, and maybe try and sit them actually as a more close Red Bull B team. Which sounds weird because they're sharing the motorhome, but they're not sharing car design, and they haven't. When other teams down the field, we remember Racing Point in previous years kind of copied the Mercedes. You've got Haas that are very closely linked to Ferrari, and actually AlphaTauri or Toro Rosso, they've always done their own thing in terms of car design, more than those teams. And when Red Bull have built such a monster this year, you take a bit of a hand-me-down from Red Bull, you're probably doing a little bit better than they're doing this year. So that's what's being rumoured at the moment as coming in for next year. The name change won't fix anything, but the car change maybe will.
Yeah, they aren't buying as many parts or taking as many parts as they should from Red Bull. Of course, it's a little bit sad because all of this will come after Franz Tost has left, who had such great ambitions for the team, Lawrence. Do you think this was part of Laura Mecki's kind of job application when he was going to take on the role, obviously, next year? Do you think that's what he wanted? He sort of wanted a bit more collaboration?
I think he would have definitely pushed for it because he would have seen the success that Ferrari have had with Haas that Jolyon suggested, and when you've got the very best available, why would you not take that? And he's come here to deliver a good job, and he's not going to want to be sitting around at the back, and if he feels that having a closer relationship with Red Bull is the answer, that's perfect. And I think Laurent will like the fact that he's coming in at a time with Peter Bayer where they can change the direction of the team. AlphaTauri and what was formerly Toro Rosso have kind of had that kind of set in and that image for a long time, and I imagine Laurent will want to come in with Peter and reset that and give them the mindset that actually we're not fighting towards the back, having those underdog days, we're going to be fighting up towards the upper echelons of the midfield and kind of being a proper junior team, a proper delivery to the Red Bull Works team, so Red Bull can always have a strong second driver.
With the gap that they have at the moment, Red Bull, if you had a Red Bull B team that was similar to Racing Point and Mercedes back in the day, they could be fighting for second in the championship still, depending on how close the tie-in is. But if they really maximise it, which surely they will do, there's such a big gulf between Red Bull and the rest that you'd at least stick an AlphaTauri in there with the rest of the big guns.
Jolyon, I love it.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, but it could be. We saw it with Racing Point.
And FYI, a little bit of an inspo for the new name for AlphaTauri. Yuki wants it to be Team Yuki. Let's hear from him. Yuki Tsunoda talking to me earlier on. Well, Yuki, lots of news at the moment about changes coming for the team, new name, maybe new location. As a driver, how much confidence do you take from that, and how needed is it at the moment?
I think it's a good move. I think anyway, we've been struggling last 2 years, and it's always been good to have more connection between the team that who's beating last 4 years in championships. And I think it's a good project. I'm feeling optimistic and exciting for the new name. How it's gonna be, how it sounds like.
Any ideas?
Team Yuki.
Team Yuki. I like it. There's also so much chat about your teammate Nick de Vries. You've been there, a rookie in Formula One. Can you identify with what he's going through this season as a rookie in the sport, with a car that you have to admit is difficult to drive?
I think he's a little bit probably he's not performing that he wanted to. Probably he knows that he can perform well more. But also I think the pace is getting there, so see how it goes, because race by race he's improving, and also the situation for our car is not helping probably him as well. But at the same time he's experienced enough to recover from there. And what he achieved in the past with other categories is really good. So I'm sure he can recover from what he having now, and that's why he's a Formula One driver now. And see how it goes.
And let's talk Team Yuki now then. How are you feeling coming into this weekend? It feels like you're getting there, even though the car's tricky.
Yeah, feeling good. Home Grand Prix for Red Bull, so more excitement. Challenging race week with the sprint qualifying, so every session is gonna count. So have to be prepared. But I think we did a lot of preparation work with the simulator. Anything can happen because it's such a tight midfield right now. So I just focus to put it all together as much as possible, and hopefully we can score points.
That was AlphaTauri's Yuki Tsunoda speaking to me earlier in the media pen, and I have to say I really enjoy interviewing Yuki at the moment. I don't know about you, Lawrence, but it just seems to have grown in confidence, and this new direction for the team could be just what he needs, and he's a real team leader, I feel, at the moment.
He seems super relaxed. It's incredible that what a run of results can really do for the confidence. I think I've interviewed him for the pre-race show that you'll see on Sunday, and he's feeling confident that he can stay at AlphaTauri, I think, and maybe even step up to Red Bull in the future, and that is like a massive change from where he was at this point last year. So it's great to see. Great to hear him being quite detailed as well, and being supportive of Nick as well in the other car, because he knows what it's like, doesn't he, to be on the difficult end of things. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what else he can deliver this year.
Absolutely. Well, we've moved outside Scuderia Ferrari. A solid race, I think, for them in Canada, and they went well here last year. Little bit of a reliability niggle last year with Carlos Sainz, but Charles Leclerc winning, Jolyon. But can they replicate that form this weekend? I mean, we've already spoken about the potential and the favouritism when it comes to Max Verstappen, but where are these guys going to shake out?
Well, I think there's a few things in their favour. They were good here last year, and Leclerc's been quite strong here for a while as well. Remember the last couple of laps showdown in, was that 2021 as well? Maybe even 2019. But also the sprint weekend, I think, will help them. 1 hour of practice in Baku, and Leclerc banged it on pole twice. That's the format again here. Maybe they're quite good at getting up to speed. So I think there are a couple of things that are working with them, but general form has been going away from them.
Well, we hear a lot from Charles Leclerc over the course of the weekend, sometimes some frustration. Carlos Sainz managing to get his head down a little better, I think, with this car this year. Let's hear from the Spanish driver now.
Carlos, I know it didn't quite work out for you here last year, but the pace of the car was good on this circuit. 12 months forward, how are you feeling about things?
Yeah, it definitely didn't. I nearly got burned here last year, but managed to get out of safe. Obviously, we lost an important podium or an important 1-2 that could have been. But year later, obviously in a much different situation till that time. But I think on our way back, on trying to change the tendency of these last few races, and being optimistic that we can keep making the progress that we've done recently.
What's kind of given you that optimism that you are on the way back? What you've seen behind the scenes at the factory, what the engineers telling you, that kind of thing?
Well, just the way I see the factory working, how much effort production is making, and design office to just bring parts nearly to every race, and big packages, trying to revert the situation. It's quite impressive to see Maranello in that mindset, and from here obviously thank them and congratulate them for the effort. But then they need to work, no? And they need to function well on track, and they need to perform. And this is what we are going to try to do on track this weekend, to find the performance, extract everything out of it, and hopefully have a better performance this year.
Interesting to see if that front wing update's going to pay dividends for the team in red this weekend. They've had a little trial in Fiorano just a few days ago, but hopefully they'll be able to put it through its paces in just that 1 hour of practice tomorrow. Lots of work to do. And who will be up against them? Will it be Mercedes? How do we rate their chances this weekend, Jolyon?
I think they're in good form at the moment, stepping forward. The last couple of races have been very good for Mercedes. I think this track will be okay for them with the faster corners in the second half of the lap. First half maybe not so much with the slower stuff, but their upgrades are coming closer. So naturally it'll be them, and naturally it will also be Fernando, I'm sure.
And in terms of the Lewis and George element, do you thinking both of them up there, or one perhaps still finding it more difficult with the car?
Yeah, I think Lewis definitely feels more comfortable with the car. I don't know whether that's because he's got a car where he feels he can really make a difference now and really fight up through the field, or he just feels slightly more confident with this direction, whereas George is maybe struggling to get on top of it at the minute. George was pretty confident today when he was chatting about it, saying, no, it's going to be all right. It's just coincidence that the results have fallen that way. But he's got to deliver on track, and at the moment Lewis is in the ascendancy and is riding high with confidence.
Certainly is. So let's hear from Sir Lewis Hamilton then ahead of the Austrian Grand Prix. Lewis, how different are your confidence levels now that the upgrades have been introduced, coming to a weekend, maybe knowing when you jump in the car you've got something better to play with?
Well, I mean, I've not been happy in the car for the past year and a bit. The step we took with the car has moved it more in the direction that I've been asking for, and so slowly rebuilding confidence in the platform that I have. It's still not 100%, and I'm still not able to extract the full potential from myself, but we're getting there.
Can you tell me what that really means during a race? How are you having to work with the car? Is it physically more demanding or just mentally more frustrating?
It's not physically more demanding. It's just you're just limited in the stability of the car, the confidence of where you can put the car. You saw last year I crashed here. So did George. The car's it's been very unpredictable for a long time, but it's becoming more predictable, which is a positive.
Thank you. Good luck to Canada. Esteban, you seem to be in such a good rhythm at the moment. What do you put that down to?
Yeah, I feel good at the moment. I feel like we've been improving massively since Monaco at the moment, and I think it's definitely down to the fact that we've bring some good updates to the car, and we got more performance out of the car, and we are qualifying super well. We still lack a little bit of performance in the race. We know what we need to bring for that to be able to improve. But it's a long process, and we're trusting in it, and hopefully there's more to come.
Well, it's a long process that now has some Hollywood involvement and investment. What was your reaction to the news that Ryan Reynolds and several friends are investing in the team? How much is that needed, do you think?
It's awesome, and I was very lucky to be able to chat to Ryan on the phone on Tuesday. I had a very cool chat. He's very much looking forward to learn, from our world, and I'm invited to the Deadpool set as well. So this I can't wait. I'm a massive fan of comics, of the Marvels, and yeah, I never thought I would have been able to chat to Ryan, but here it is, and yeah, all the investors that are joining. I think it's super news. It really shows the commitment of Alpine in the long term. And also they are going to bring their expertise, to improve all the weak areas that we have in the team. They have a lot of knowledge on sports team, and that's very good for us.
Is there an element of pressure now, and they want certain performances from you? I'm thinking of Wrexham Football Club. Obviously, they've had success with them. They're going to want the same from you. Do you think you can deliver that?
That's what we want. We want to be able to, fight to the top as soon as we can. We had a podium this year. We're on the upward trajectory, and I think that is also why all these people believe in us, because they are coming on board. So it's positive pressure. All good.
Esteban Ocon talking to me earlier in the media pen, now having a quick chat with Fred Vasseur and Gwen from Mercedes, who manages the young drivers there, and I think had a bit of an influence on Esteban's career as well. But I love the fact that Esteban's on the phone to Ryan Reynolds. He's sending him simulator pictures as well. The other day he was like, I'm in the simulator, this is my view. I love that. I'm not sure what this Hollywood influence is going to bring, but if it's money they need, that's money they're getting, Joe.
Well, it can only be a good thing really for Alpine. I think the fact that a manufacturer is selling a part of their team is, on the face of it, a little bit strange. You thought Renault and Alpine, the Renault group, could fund it pretty well themselves, but they obviously want to offload. They think that this new group can bring something. They've brought some A-list celebrities, which Esteban Ocon's pretty happy with, and maybe it's just a little bit of extra finance that they need to change some infrastructure and get that team back to the front. And I think it's quite a fun project, isn't it, for them? I'd love to come in, and I don't know how much they know about Formula One, but get your teeth into it and see what you can do.
The teams are waiting for you to knock on the door, Jolyon. They are waiting.
Yeah, but they don't want my small bucks.
OK, well, maybe you could join the consortium. Lawrence, I'm interested in the timings of this deal, because I imagine Ryan Reynolds didn't wake up this Monday morning and think he'd like to put some money into Alpine. Bearing in mind, back in Miami, we had Laurent Rossi, the CEO of Alpine, sort of shouting and screaming about his team and saying things weren't going right. Do you think that had anything to do with the deal that was ongoing, trying to sort of show these investors that they really mean business and they're not prepared to settle for second best?
Well, as far as I know, the deal came together very quickly, actually, probably after Miami. So it would have been after that he's opened those talks with the three investor groups rather in the consortium. So I think it was a little bit further along than that. I think what Alpine are keen to do is make the team self-sufficient effectively. So they've got rid of all the debt to Renault. They can stand on their own 2 feet with this new investment. And we've seen teams like Mercedes, they've got Ineos invested as well, and they've taken some money out as well. So I think for Alpine, they just want to have it as a standalone operation. Valued at 900 million, they're clearly doing something right, and obviously it make them slightly more attractive to other teams. And what they need to do is spend the money on the factory. They need to spend it on performance, and they need to have it so that when they can kick on, like Aston Martin, that's what they want to do, they're in a position to do that.
And they need to be able to spend that money along the lines of the budget cap and the cost cap, of course. Of course, as you mentioned, Aston Martin putting on a great show when it comes to that and almost setting an example for the likes of Alpine. Aston Martin, can they challenge this weekend? Aston with Fernando, with Lance Stroll as well?
Oh, well, they can challenge with Fernando. They do it every weekend. I mean, there's only 2 races he's not been on the podium so far. So they can definitely do that. They've got upgrades that came on for Canada. They're still trying to maximise what they can do there. And I think with the good thing for Aston Martin is that Sergio Perez has just fallen away a little bit. So you're kind of the first man to go and attack Max Verstappen now, if you're second. I mean, Checo's been out of Q3 for the last 3 races. So with him off the boil, it does open the door for both Fernando and Mercedes, maybe Ferrari, to get sniffing of a victory. What about Lance? He's just a bit subdued. I was more impressed with him at the start of the year, and he's just falling away a little bit, also struggling on Saturdays a bit too much. I
think we were so impressed, weren't we, with that bounce back after his injuries from the cycling crash at the beginning of the year. Are they still playing into his performance, do you think, Lawrence?
No, I think he's 100% fully fit, and I think he feels like he's in great shape. He said physically he's been training really well. I think what's frustrating for him is he was actually performing better when he was slightly injured, and maybe that took some of the pressure off, whereas obviously now there aren't really any excuses and he's got to kick on. But it must be pretty hard to be going up against Fernando Alonso week in, week out, and he's just smashing it and not making any mistakes. But I fancy Fernando for the win this weekend, because I think...
Steady on, we're not at predictions just yet.
I know, but I just want to get this in while we're here.
Okay.
Like, they've got the upgrade that they still haven't really fully learned about yet, so I think we'll see a little bit more of that around here. It's a short lap, so the gaps between each driver is going to be much smaller. This is where Fernando can maybe make the difference. Maybe get himself in front. Look, this is it. This is the one.
He's staked his claim early on. Hope you didn't have Fernando for the win. Yeah, exactly. Well, upgrades, you say. Upgrades you're going to get. McLaren bringing their serious upgrade this weekend. Interesting time to introduce it. You'd think you'd wait for a non-sprint weekend, but Lando Norris getting the upgrade, Oscar having to wait until Silverstone. This is supposedly 50% of this upgrade that we're going to see over the course of the next 3 race weekends. They need it, don't they, Joe? But what will they be able to get from it this weekend?
Well, hopefully a hatful of points. And they almost could have had it in Canada as well. And I thought Lando was driving brilliantly through the weekend. And the car was okay from the early upgrades that they bought in Baku. Made a little bit of progress. This is the big chunk. And they were trying to bring it for next week. They had a bit early. They were like, well, let's chuck it on Lando, who's still the better driver at the moment. And he's got pedigree at the circuit. I think I'm banking on Lando for at least a good haul of points, because I think he's still driving at the top of his game. If they can add a bit of downforce to the car, which is clearly the big aim of the upgrades, then they need to find just a few tenths in that close midfield, and they'll be right up there in Q3 solidly. And I think he's the driver to get some points. You're
right. First podium here in Austria for Lando Norris. And again, as you say, Jolyon, driving brilliantly in Canada. Some lovely moves into that hairpin in Montreal. Let's hear from Lando Norris then. Upgrades on his car this weekend.
I think we're approaching the same as always, to be honest. I think we always do a good job with our approach. So, of course, some new bits on my car and so on. It's also a sprint race weekend, so it's probably not the easiest kind of days coming up. Of course, exciting ones at the same time, but not easy. Not a lot of time to kind of look into things, assess them, and yeah, kind of keep everything under control. So it's going to be tough, but we still think it's the best thing to do. So. I'm looking forward to it.
And it's rumoured to be 50% of the upgrade, with more coming over the next few weeks. For you, how can you assess that as in person? I know you say you haven't got much time, but what will you be working on when it comes to practice?
I mean, FP1 is a lot of it is just kind of driving, getting back into the swing of things. I'm sure, if things correlate well, there'll be differences that you feel, or I'll be able to feel quite quickly. And I think it's actually an interesting thing. We have one car on the new stuff, one car on the old stuff, so we can compare things very well and easily. The rest is I just drive as quickly as I can and just do my job.
Drive as quickly as I can and just do my job. There you go. Well, a lot of learning for McLaren coming up over the next 36 hours or so, I'd say. Quite a lot to work out in terms of that new upgrade. Let's turn our attention now to Alfa Romeo, because Valtteri Bottas picked up the final point in Montreal with a lovely little drag race to the line where he did lose out, but it sort of showed a little sign of promise. How are Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu faring, do you think, Joe?
I actually think it's pretty difficult for them. There's been sort of flashes of something. Strategy is what got Valtteri to the points in Canada, and even then he lost out on that final one coming out of the last corner to Lance. And they've been quite evenly matched with Zhou and Bottas. You'd expect Valtteri to be a little bit ahead, so maybe it's really impressive from Zhou. But generally, it's a team that's been falling backwards since the start of the year, hoping for some level of resurgence, and 1 point in Canada at least is something towards that.
Big point score, I'm going to say. I know it's not huge compared to a Max Verstappen haul necessarily, but Alex Albon in Montreal, Lawrence, that was a sensational drive from Alex. He had the upgrades on his car. His teammate Logan Sargent didn't. Hopefully this weekend Logan will have them, and we'll start to get a bit of a picture on a track where perhaps they might go quite nicely.
Yeah, it was a huge result for the team because, some of their heads were starting to drop. It'd been a difficult time up until that point. They've had a ton of races where they'd actually looked pretty good and not got the reward for it. And they were down in 10th behind AlphaTauri, and they just genuinely felt they deserved so much more. So to get that massive haul of points, move into P9 in the Constructors' Championship, that's obviously going to be good prize money, hopefully at the end of the year, if they can hold on to it, is good. I think Alex has been driving so well this year, so he'll fancy coming to this kind of circuit where he has driven very well in the past before and getting another result out of it. Hopefully, if he feels comfortable with the car from the off and he can get a good setup straight away, maybe he can get some more heroics going into Q3, into that weekend, and maybe snatch a point or two in the sprint.
Yeah, looking good. And as you say, points mean prizes in the monetary and financial way. And actually, I think Alex is just there. Hello. Walking with Logan, his teammate, and Zhou Guanyu. Those points might translate into some money that will help them transform their facilities, which their new team principal, James Vowles, has been very vocal about. Let's talk about Haas now then. This is a track where traditionally they've gone quite well. It seems to be a good track for them. Kevin Magnussen, Nico Hülkenberg. Where are we going to put them? Because race pace seems to be tricky for them. They've got 2 races really this weekend. So what does that mean for their outlook?
I think they're going to be pretty hopeful they can be fighting to get into Q3, I think, on a Saturday afternoon. If they get everything right, that car over 1 lap is very strong. The issue, obviously, is you come to Sunday and the thing is just dropping like a sack of potatoes. Like, they just literally got no pace in the car. And Kevin and Nico feel like they've found a solution to what they've got to do, but I don't think it's an easy fix, and they've got a lot more work to do going forward. So I think it's going to be a tough weekend. That said, they've always gone well here, weirdly. Like, this is always their strongest race of the year. So maybe the stars will align in some freak scenario where they will have a good weekend.
Yeah, it was an amazing result for Nico, qualifying on the front row in Canada. Obviously, a penalty then applied. And Jolyon, we often say that AlphaTauri looks like the worst car. Where does the Haas fit for you as a driver looking on?
At the moment, it looks like the worst car, which is crazy for a guy that just put it on the second in qualifying. But the crucial thing is the race pace is what gets you points, and there will be races where they can bank the points, and Hülkenberg got a load in Melbourne, a low degradation circuit where you can use that qualifying pace and just stay there. This track is sort of medium degradation. It's quite possible to overtake with plenty of DRS, big braking opportunities as well. And if you've got a degradation, if you're suffering with degradation, you can be passed. You can't just sort of park it, get your elbows out and rely on that amazing qualifying that Nico's been putting in. So I think by virtue of that, the race pace of them is definitely the worst at the moment, and they need to get on top of it quick.
Well, let's hear from Kevin Magnussen ahead of this weekend. It could be potentially a good one for them.
Kevin, I know recent races, or mostly this season, the cars really struggled to get performance on a Sunday afternoon. Are you guys starting to understand why that is the case?
Yeah, I think we're starting, but it's a process, and I think it's important to really understand the problem well, and then go on to find a solution. It's probably not a quick fix, but it's something that we need to try and understand well. We have a strong car in 1 lap. I think it's where we, you always want more, but it's kind of where we expected it to be in qualifying. But then in the race, it seems like we often find a weakness, especially in traffic and on tire life. Not so much on 1 lap pace again, but the outright pace in the car is pretty good. So yeah, it's something that we're working on and aware of.
That's your runners and riders then. Let's take another look at the track. It's a short one, short lap time. Are the cars going to be bunched closer together this weekend then, Jolyon, or is that too simplistic of you?
No, that's bang on.
Oh,
7 corners,
perfect.
Short lap. It'll be really tough to separate. The slightest mistake can make a big difference when you're talking thousands of a second margin this year in the midfield, and certainly in qualifying as well, even towards the sharp end. You have a little lock up in any of the 3 big braking zones and the whole lap's gone. You tumble out in qualifying. Traffic's going to be a major problem as well through both the qualifying and the sprint shootout qualifying as well. So yeah, it does leave it open to a bit more jeopardy, I'd say, this weekend, the short track.
Exactly what I was going to say, a bit more jeopardy, Lawrence. That's what we kind of like to see. It's what the fans are paying their money to come and watch, aren't they? A little bit of jeopardy, a few peaks across the weekend.
Yeah, definitely. And we've seen on occasion the sprint format really has delivered that kind of excitement in sprint qualifying and into sprint race. So let's hope that we do kind of get the benefits of the track characteristics that have delivered such great racing around here with this new format, and that just gives us spice all the way from qualifying tomorrow straight through to the race on Sunday.
Oh, lots to look forward to, and it's time for predictions. I'd like your podium for the sprint and for the race. No, joking, just for the race. Lawrence, you must go first.
Okay, so I'm going to go Alonso win, Carlos second, Max third.
Okay, interesting. Wow. Who's starting on pole, just out of interest? I'm just making this race up in my head.
Max going to start
Max on pole. Okay, interesting. Jolyon?
No, that's a madness. It's going to be Max winning.
Yeah.
Red Bull's home race. The guy's winning everything at the moment easily. He's going to win it again. But behind, I fancy Ferrari for a podium. I'm going to say let's go with Charles second, and then third for Lewis Hamilton.
Okay, so, nice little spread of drivers there.
What about you, Rosanna?
I think I've got to go for Max. Sorry to go against your Fernando Alonso
That's okay.
prediction. It's all right.
That's
You're
okay.
still on the hype train. It's destination unknown. But Max Verstappen for the win. I think I'd like probably Fernando P2. And then maybe Charles. Maybe. Or Perez, actually. Let's just put him back in. I feel like he needs a good weekend. So P3, sorry, there we go. Thank you very much.
Spread it across the board there pretty nicely.
Yeah, exactly. No favouritism here, or knowledge as it turns out, probably. Thank you, Lawrence Barretto and Jolyon Palmer, for talking us through your thoughts as we head into the Austrian Grand Prix weekend. Plenty to look out for, so let's take a look how the weekend schedule plays out. So on Friday morning, we are going to get ready for practice 1, which starts at 1:15 track time. Then your pre-quali show is at 4:30, ahead of qualifying itself at 5. And then the post-qualifying show is just after the checkered flag. Looking ahead to Saturday, you've got your sprint shootout at 11:45. We'll be getting ready for that. And then the pre-sprint at 4 o'clock. That's your show, getting you ready for the sprint itself at 4:30. And then we'll be discussing everything we've seen in the post-sprint show after the checkered flag. And then Sunday, it's time for your Grand Prix, of course. The Austrian Grand Prix race day looks like this. You'll have your pre-race show at 2 o'clock, and then lights go out at 3 o'clock for the Formula 1 Rolex Große Preis von Österreich. How did I do on that one? Lots to look forward to then across the weekend here in Austria. Plenty to watch out for. Can anyone stop the runaway train that is Red Bull and Max Verstappen, of course, here on home soil? A perfect result, I think, would be a 1-2. If you want to find out what happens, you can join us across the weekend here on Formula 1. Plenty to look for and plenty of excitement coming your way with a sprint weekend to boot. Hopefully you'll join us across the weekend. Goodbye.